Oh, hey, let's talk about the colonization of lacrosse because it is very colonized. So, lacrosse was not born in some Ivy League field house or some prep school. The game goes back over 1,000 years to the indigenous peoples of North America. It was originally called stickball, and it's extremely sacred. It's spiritual, it's ceremonial, and it's played to honor the creator, to settle disputes, to prepare warriors, and to unify communities. Some tribes even called it the little brother of war or little war. Games would span miles and last for days and include up to 1,000 players per side. There was no bleachers, no turf, no lines, just earth, trees, and intention. So let's talk about the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, also known as the Iroquois Confederacy. So for them, lacrosse is more than a sport. It's a gift from the creator. It's medicine, it's identity, it's cultural, it's roots, right? Even the materials mean something. So the wood is hickory, and it represents strength and connection to the earth. It's also known as the mother wood. And the leather stringing in the net symbolizes the interconnectedness between life and players and community and creation, right? And the creator, right? The net doesn't just hold the ball, it also holds prayer and healing and purpose. Every stick handcrafted, every game intentional, everything symbolic and racked with meaning, right? This brings me to one of the greats I want to mention, Alfie Jacques. Alfie was a legendary lacrosse stick maker from the Turtle Clan of the Onondaga Nation, part of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. And his handcrafted wooden sticks, they were not just equipment, right? They were art, they were masterpiece, they were legacy. They carried the spirit of the people who invented this beautiful game. Alfie was a master craftsman and one of the greatest ambassadors of the sport, and unfortunately passed in 2023. So rest in power, Alfie. But here's where colonization comes in, right? European settlers, of course, saw indigenous people playing the sport. They were fascinated, but instead of honoring it or respecting it, they were like, ooh, let's take that. They renamed it. French Jesuit missionaries called it Lacrosse because the stick resembled a bishop's cross, and they changed the rules. They stripped it of ceremony, stripped it of intention, and they rebranded it as a sport for white elites. In the 1970s, also, the materials changed. There was a huge transition to rubber and plastic and aluminum replacing wood and leather. And then mass production replaced the artistry. And in that shift, most indigenous stick makers, the culture bearers, the master artists, they were pushed out of business, and the market, it vanished. The demand disappeared, and with it, a tradition that was deeply tied to identity, economy, and sacred craft. Also, this goes without saying, indigenous players were also excluded from leagues and international competitions despite being the ones who invented the game. Not surprised. Now, I have a very personal connection to this because I played lacrosse in high school and in college, and in high school I went to a very diverse high school, and I had players who looked like me. I played with black people, brown people, whatever. And in college, I saw the shift, the gatekeeping, the silence about all of this, I felt the othering, the whiteness of it all. And let me be clear, indigenous people have never stopped playing. They kept the spirit of the game alive even as the world tried to erase them. I want to say shout out to the Haudenosaunee Nationals, which is the only indigenous sports organization in the world that competes on the international stage. They travel on their own passports, sanctioned by the sovereign Haudenosaunee Grand Council, and they're truly not just playing, they're representing sovereignty and survival and strength. And again, this isn't just a game, it's a living act of resistance and resilience and reclamation. And I think it's important, if you play lacrosse or love lacrosse or know somebody who loves it and plays it, I think it's so important to know this history and to say this history, because it's not just about the game, it's about justice and identity and honoring the people who created it. And lastly, it is important to support indigenous-owned businesses. And there's a few that are still keeping this tradition alive, like Mohawk Lacrosse and Tuscarora Woodworks. And I want to say, the culture of this is not gone. It's fighting to be seen. And sometimes when we look at the history, it's so overwhelming, right? And people are like, what do we do? How do we support all the things? And it's so important to, one, immerse yourself and educate yourself in the history. And it's so easy to research. It's easy to research and figure out how you can support local tribes or national tribes and support these businesses and just take action. And also, I think it is important to call your representatives and talk about the missing and murdered Indigenous women, and to support organizations directly by donating to them. And just, there's things that you can do, and there's so many grassroots orgs that set up websites and have action steps and all these different things. So I highly encourage people to do that. And to anyone who would be defensive about people talking about the wonderful history of this, but also the tragic history of this, ask yourself what you're defending. Until next time, y'all.